Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. On this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 47 event, which will take place live on August 16th. I'll give you my 6 main card predictions on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary breakdowns will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. As you can tell, I'm taking this unique opportunity to jump back in front of the camera like I used to do with my old videos. I significantly upgraded the set. I don't see this being a prolonged change, but certainly with the time lapse with UFC 176 being canceled, I had the time to put into it, so I thought this would be kind of fun. Please let me know how you guys think the set looks. Nonetheless, lots of fights to predict here. Make sure, if you're interested in betting on the event, you take a shot with my $10 bet packs. Also, Sprawl and Brawl Fantasy MMA will be available. The prediction panel will also be posting all of their predictions. And as I said, everything's available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. We have 6 fights, so let's get to the first one. Our first of 6 main card fights takes place in the UFC's featherweight division as 22-5-1 divisional debutant Thiago Tavares takes on 18-4-0 with 1 no contest Robbie Problems Peralta. Now Tavares, as I said, this is 145-pound debut. He had bulked up a little bit since moving at lightweight, so the cut could be a little bit much for him, but he has taken a little bit of time off to hopefully make it work. The Brazilian had a little bit of questionable cardio coming in, known to fade in a lot of his fights, and the big issue there is, will the cut actually improve his cardio, or will it be further draining? Now, Peralta has been on a pretty decent run in the UFC, but he's been far from untouchable. Overall, he's 4-1 with 1 no contest, but he was losing his fight against Esteban Payan before pulling off the late knockout, and his last fight with Honey Jason, while he pulled off the upset, it was still a very close matchup. For Thiago, he's been very inconsistent overall. He can finish fights, and he's shown he's been dominant in matchups. He's also been finished several times, which is definitely a red flag. Now, both fighters have areas of vulnerability coming to this matchup that the other man is known to exploit in past fights. Tavares is a BJJ black belt, 12 wins by submission. He averages just over 3.3 takedowns per fight at a 40% completion rate, so pretty solid numbers. And for Robbie Peralta, 2 of his losses have come by submission. We saw him taken down several times, controlled on the mat by Esteban Payan, Honey Jason, and Akira Corsani also took him down on a couple of occasions. But Peralta is a BJJ blue belt and has a 73% takedown defense, so he's not that easy to take down, but it certainly can be. Now, we did see Robbie counter a couple times against Jason in his matchup and land on top, but he's still at risk on the mat against Thiago Tavares, especially early on. Now, on the other side of things for Robbie Peralta, he's 13-0 in fights ended by knockout. He averages 4.35 strikes landed per minute. He has some significant power in his hands. He also has some very hard leg kicks he's going to want to implement in this matchup. He's showed in his last fight and in several other matches, he launches these powerful hook combinations, throwing them in 2s and 3s and really walking down his opponent. That's how he ended up stopping Esteban Payan. He landed several good shots and simply overwhelmed Honey Jason with those shots during portions of that fight. Now, you look at Thiago Tavares, he has 2 wins by knockout. He's certainly improved his striking of late, but he's also been knocked out 3 times by Shane Roller, Matt Wyman, and Khabib Nurmagomedov. 3 guys really not known for their devastating striking. Now, another area, too, with Tavares, he lands just under 2 strikes per minute while giving up almost 2.5 strikes absorbed, so certainly he's taking more damage than he's dishing out on the feet. And overall, he's had trouble with aggressive strikers in his career. And if you look at the speed and the smaller opponents who are going to be faster at featherweight, certainly could give him issues, especially if his cardio takes a toll as well. Now, when you look at the physical matchup, Peralta's actually going to be an inch taller and have an inch reach advantage on Tavares. So even though Thiago is coming down from the division up, he's at least lengthwise, he'll be at a deficit here. Now, Tavares, very early on in this matchup, is going to be very dangerous, especially if he gets this match to the ground. If he can earn a submission, that's fantastic, and that's obviously he picks up the win that way. But if he struggles to land takedowns early, I anticipate he's going to fade. We saw that against Sam Stout, despite the fact he won that matchup. I anticipate Robbie Peralta is going to keep coming forward with big shots, and I think that win over Honey Jason was a major confidence builder. He needs to avoid the ground game early, and I think he'll do that, and my prediction is Robbie Peralta to eventually land a big shot and defeat Thiago Tavares by knockout. Our next fight takes place in the UFC's heavyweight division as Shawn the Savage Jordan with a record of 15-6-0 battles the outlaw Jack May with a record of 7 wins and 1 loss. May's making his 2nd UFC appearance. Now, we always have that heavyweight issue, the physical disparity in matchups, and this certainly shows up here. May's going to have to be 8 inches taller than Jordan, have a 3 to 4 inch reach advantage depending on what source you take your information from. Jordan should be slightly heavier, but it'll be fairly close. Now, take a look. These guys are finishers with a combined 20 of 22 wins coming inside the distance. May, 6 wins by knockout versus Jordan, who's knocked out 11 opponents. May's coming off his first loss via knockout, so that's certainly interesting. There's first loss overall, actually, which he was stopped by Derek Lewis in his debut. For Jordan, he has 4 losses by knockout in his career, and 2 in a row. Certainly both guys, especially Jouban, have shown their chins aren't nearly as stout as they have been in the past. Now, both guys also could take this fight to the mat. I'll talk about that first. Now, May comes from a solid catch wrestling training camp. He trains alongside Josh Barnett, despite the fact he has no submission wins. He showed some pretty, decent grappling skills in his first fight. He was bull rushed by Lewis and taken down, but he eventually reversed the position and swept into top control. Nice takedown. It landed later on in the fight, and he advanced immediately into full mount, landed some hard ground and pound. He stayed heavy on top and looked pretty solid until he eventually tried to go too far, lost the position, wound up on bottom, and eventually was finished from that position. Now, Shawn Jouban, just 3 wins by submission, but he's very capable on the mat. He trains at Greg Jackson, so we know he's a capable submission fighter. In his second Strikeforce appearance, he submitted LeVar Johnson with a paintbrush submission, which was very impressive. He really capitalized on that. And he also has some heavy ground and pound. We saw him stop Mike Russo with that top position strikes. He averages 1.42 takedowns at 35%, so not a dominating wrestler, but still it's an option he can go to. I anticipate he's going to look to use his lower stature here to maybe control May against the cage and really get those underhooks and establish that body control that can be hard to shake off, especially with Shawn Jouban being so physically strong. But I anticipate most of the action of this fight is going to take place on the feet. Looking at May first, he's got a kickboxing style. He has K1 and Glory kickboxing experience. He uses a traditional Muay Thai stance, very hard leg kicks, and he will go to the body and head as well, especially with Shawn Jouban being shorter. That head kick is going to be certainly available for him. Now, the one thing with May, though, he's fairly stationary, not a lot of leg work as we see with the Muay Thai strikers. Not overly fleet of foot, so he's certainly going to be there to be hit. His cardio and chin are major question marks, especially at heavyweight, which is a huge concern. He's only gotten beyond the 3-minute mark twice now, once in his last fight, and earlier in his career he went exactly 3 minutes in the matchup. So certainly not known for going deep in matchups. For Shawn Jouban, he hits incredibly hard. He has above average speed for heavyweight, which can be a difficult thing for these bigger guys to deal with. But he needs to close the distance. He needs to be very careful there. Against Matt Mitrione, he was landing some decent shots at range prior to getting hurt and finishing the waning moments of the opening round of that matchup. Shawn Jouban will stand and trade. He's not afraid to do that, even though it could be to his detriment. On average, he lands 3.13 strikes per minute, which is a pretty good clip for a heavyweight. You don't see those numbers usually creep over 2.5 of the heavyweights, unless you're Cain Velasquez. But he also gets tagged around 3.4, which is way too much when you have these big guys landing big shots on you. Now, Jouban has to be very careful early in this matchup. Especially just like Thiago and Robbie Peralta we talked in the last matchup, especially when closing the distance. We saw him when he closed the distance against Gabriel Gonzaga. That's where he got tagged and eventually finished. I anticipate he's going to use his speed and physicality to simply wear Jack May down. I think overall he's simply the better fighter. He's faced better competition in his career. He has better experience. Jordan's chin's a major concern, especially against Jack May early in that matchup, but my anticipation is that Jouban is going to get a dominant position if he doesn't land something big on the feet, and my prediction is Shawn Jouban to defeat Jack May by TKO. Our third bout of the evening takes place in the UFC's welterweight division as Seth, the Polish Pistola Baczynski, with a record of 18 wins and 9 losses, battles UFC debutant Alan Brahma Jouban with a record of 9 wins and 2 losses. Now, as I said, Jouban is a debuting fighter against a long-term UFC opponent in a slump as Baczynski's coming off some difficulties lately. He's lost 3 of his last 4. And you look at the guys he's lost to a couple of very fast strikers in Brian Melanson, who's now retired, and Thiago Alves, and he also was shut down by Mike Pearson's very strong wrestling game. Basically, both guys are very tall for the division, but Seth Baczynski is very unique at 6'4", and he'll have a 4-inch height advantage in this matchup. Now, Jouban has faced some decent competition outside of the UFC. He lost to current UFC roster owner Mike Rhodes in a pretty decent matchup, and he also stopped Chris Spang, who spent a very short period of time in the UFC and also spent some time in Strikeforce. Now, Jouban is a Muay Thai-based striker. He has some power in his hands, 6 wins by knockout. He works his kicks into his attacks very well. Very hard leg kicks, including an inside thigh kick, which can be very devastating. And if he lands it, it can really slow an opponent down. He also has a nasty liver kick that he looks to deploy. And he's pretty good from range, but he also will come in and attack. For Baczynski, he's very tall for a welterweight, but he doesn't use his reach and his length overly well. He has a decent kicking game as well. We'll see him employ that. But he's been knocked out twice by very short or much smaller guys, as the aforementioned Brian Melanson and Roger Bowling way back earlier in his career. So these are guys who are able to get on the inside and land some big shots. We saw Baczynski switched up camps for the Thiago Alves fight, and he used a lot of movement in his approach against Alves, and I anticipate he's going to do something similar here. Now, he had trouble with the kicking game of Alves, and if you go back to his win over Lance Benoist, he also had trouble in that matchup with Benoist's kicks. He landed them at will and was able to, do some damage in that matchup. But Baczynski, he has decent pop in his strikes, 7 wins by knockout, and he works very well from the clinch, which, invites guys in, and that's sometimes where the issue is. He wants guys to close the distance where he can tie up and control them, and it puts him in range and takes his length out of the equation. Now, he has a very serviceable wrestling game. He was outclassed by Mike Pierce badly, but he used it very effectively against Neil Magny, so depending on who he's facing, it depends on how effective it is. He has been taken down several times in fights, and that's something of a concern there. Now, he has 10 wins by submission, so he's very capable on the ground. He tapped out Matt Brown, but he's also been submitted 5 times, so it's one of those things. He goes to the mat, he's a risk. It's also could be a reward situation. Now, for Jouban, he can work on the mat. He's very effective, excellent top control. He's an Eddie Bravo trained fighter. If he gets past the guard, which he's very effective at guard passing, he's very difficult for the opponent on bottom to retain guard, and that's a tough position to deal with. He lacks a really strong wrestling game. He's a much better grappler. He is capable of getting the fight to the mat, but he's simply not a great wrestler. We saw him taken down several times by Mike Rhodes, which is a major concern, especially because he is very willing to fight off his back. He's able to fight off his back and throw up submissions, but it's something that's not a favorable position if you can't submit the guy. If he does get taken down by Seth Baczynski, which is a real reality, expect to see him use the rubber guard to try and control and threaten and neutralize the attack. He'll throw a lot of elbows off his back, and again, as I said, he's maybe a little bit too willing to work from that position, but he's not, useless there. Now, another thing with Jouban, he has shown the tendency to slow down in fights, especially if he overextends himself early, but it's not that drastic, not that noticeable, and Baczynski's certainly isn't a cardio horse in his own right. The one thing with Jouban in this match, he has to defend the wrestling game, he has to be active off his back if he does get taken down, and he has to get back up, and I anticipate seeing him do that. He really should have a speed advantage in this matchup. His hands are a little bit quicker. I kind of see something similar to what he throws with Brian Lanson had success landing big shots on Baczynski. I think that kicking game plays a big role, especially the inside leg kick. I expect to see him slow down Baczynski and tag him with that. Baczynski, along with his 7 combined losses inside the distance, so he's been stopped 7 times. He's also 2-4 in decisions, which is not a good record. It shows he struggles to outpoint guys in long fights. And he also tends to hold his chin up a little bit too high, and for a taller guy, it's a big target, especially for that overhand right that Jouban, I expect him to fit in there. So my prediction is Alan Jouban to defeat Seth Baczynski. I'm going to take Jouban by knockout. Fight number 4 comes to us in UFC's middleweight division. It formerly was the co-main event until UFC 176 was canceled and things were shuffled around. What we have here is number 14th ranked Tim the Barbarian Boetsch, 17-7-0, battling Brad Tavares, formerly top 15 ranked Brad Tavares with a record of 12 wins and 3 losses. Now, Tavares is coming off a pretty big setback against Yoel Romero. He had a good run preceding that, and Romero just showed him he wasn't quite ready, but Tavares is young. I expect him to rebound. For Boetsch, he was off to a very good start since cutting down from light heavyweight, but he's really stumbled of late. He really hasn't had a complete, solid effort since his fight against Nick Ring, who he defeated. And he's coming off a very quick submission against Luke Rockhold, where the line was astronomical in the favor of Luke Rockhold. Certainly it showed why as he smashed through Boetsch very quickly. Now, what we have here is the speed and cardio and technique of Brad Tavares against the power and physicality of Tim Boetsch. Now, Boetsch, he comes from a wrestling background, but he hasn't been a dominant wrestler in his run in the UFC. Averages less than 2 takedowns at just under 50%. We did see him take Costa Philippou down a couple of times, which is pretty significant because Costa's got some good takedown defense. And he really likes that guillotine, which is awesome if he can hit it, but he also gives up position. That can cost him. He's a Matt Hume trained fighter, so he's a very capable grappler and certainly is not a fish out of water on the mat. Now, Tavares, we saw him really struggle with the wrestling and unpredictability of Yoel Romero. Romero really threw him around that matchup like a rag doll. He had some trouble creating separation in that matchup, and against Aaron Simpson, which is his other career loss. Both good wrestlers were able to tie up, and I think Boetsch is going to look to do something there. In his matchup against Lorenz Larkin, he uses wrestling very effectively. I don't anticipate seeing him use a lot of wrestling against Tim Boetsch, but he could use his shot to set up his strikes. He has done it before, fake a shot and land something up top as his opponent, drops down to defend the takedown. But Boetsch has had some trouble with good wrestlers, especially as he slows down, so it could be there for Tavares if he looks to employ it. Now, what we see here is Tavares, he's going to want to fight from distance, where Boetsch on the feet, he wants to bring it in close and really tie up his opponent. Tavares, when he fought Lorenz Larkin, was a very, very good striker. He was very much on point. Tavares is working his striking with Ray Sefo, and that's one of the best striking coaches you can get in the game. He steps into his strikes very well. He has an exceptionally solid left hook, a good straight right, which he'll usually throw in combination, and he will finish with a kick, which can be an effective 1-2-3 there. Strong low kicks as well, which he can tag from the outside, and he can also counter strike if his opponent wants to, be aggressive, which Boetsch most likely will be. He changes levels effectively, will go to the body, solid combinations, as I mentioned, and he sets up his strikes with a lot of movement, a lot of feints, gets his opponent guessing, looks for those openings. The issue going back to the Yoel Romero matchup was the speed of Romero was really throwing Tavares off, but Tavares, Brad, should be faster than Tim Boetsch in this matchup, which should make him the more effective striker, at least make his striking more effective than it was in his last matchup. Now, Boetsch, he's basically very strong at middleweight, but obviously cutting down costs him a little bit as his cardio isn't that strong. He seems to slow down in fights. It's not like he's dragging his ass by the end of the matchup, but he certainly is still, not the fighter he was in the opening moments. He likes to throw that really hard teep kick up the middle, which can really slow his opponent down. He's a hard right hand, decent left hook, heavy uppercuts, which we saw him employ against Yushin Okami, eventually stopped that fight. He throws a lot, though, in singles. He doesn't string his punches together as effectively as he could, and that's a major issue against a guy like Brad Tavares, who certainly will throw those punches in combination. What Boetsch likes to do is when he ties guys up, he'll land strikes in the break when they do break. If he ties the opponent up, he likes to employ that collar tie, really control his opponent, land those uppercuts, hard punches and elbows in close, and really bust him up and impose his will from the short range. Now, when he fought Nick Ring, that's way back, he had a lot of trouble closing the distance with Ring. And the reason I talk about that is because Brad Tavares used a similar speed and distance striking that Ring does. Ring used a lot of movement, something Boetsch had a lot of trouble with. He kind of followed him too much, not allowed Ring to really evade and land the better shots, at least early on in that matchup. When you go to his most recent fight against, or not one of his most recent fights against CB Dollaway, every time Boetsch closed the distance, he was getting tagged by Dollaway, and he really struggled with CB's speed and the variety of striking that CB was throwing at him. He was getting hit routinely with a left hook, which is something CB throws well, and Brad Tavares throws well as well. And that's something, against CB work from distance, I anticipate Brad Tavares is going to work from distance and do it effectively. I anticipate that Tavares is going to be the faster fighter, being the more diverse striker. That's going to certainly show up, and his ability to cover that distance when he does attack is huge. Cardio could also be an issue against for Tim Boetsch, as I previously mentioned. And Brad Tavares, he doesn't slow down. He's a guy who's able to keep going. Even when he was getting beaten up by Yoel Romero, he still was in pretty good shape by the end of that matchup, at least cardio-wise. Boetsch should try to employ his wrestling, try and make this a physical fight, get on top, control him against the cage, and do whatever he can to keep his hands on Brad Tavares. That's easier said than done. He's going to struggle in that position. I think Brad Tavares will be the more active and effective striker, and my prediction is Brad Tavares defeats Tim Boetsch by decision. We move now to what is the revamped co-main event for this card. Is the number 12th ranked Gray Maynard, 12-4-1 with 1 no contest. Battles Ross, the real deal Pearson, former Ultimate Fighter winner. He carries a record of 17 wins, 7 losses, and also has 1 no contest. And of course, this fight's taking place in the UFC's lightweight division. Now, this fight was put together after Abel Trujillo pulled out of his matchup with Ross Pearson, which was the co-main event. Maynard was bumped up to face Pearson. His original fight with Fabricio Camoes was scrapped. And if you want to go one step further, this fight was originally slated to take place, Camoes versus Maynard, that is, at UFC 176. It was relocated. Now, what these fight guys have done recently, Pearson's coming off a robbery against Thiago Sanchez, very disappointing, and that's something that he'll have to overcome and get back in and show up here. As he fought an excellent fight and was completely robbed. 30-27 in the card was a terrible decision on the judges' parts. For Gray Maynard, certainly he's in an interesting place in his career. He's talked about retirement. His motivation just seems not to be there. He's coming off a 9-month layoff between fights, and he's still, I don't know if he's still suffering from the post-title fight letdown, that little series he had with Frankie Edgar, but certainly it impacted him and it's probably sent his career in a downward slope, as he was only a couple shots away from being the champion. He fights to a draw and then gets stopped in the second matchup by a guy he felt he was completely outclassing in the first fight. Now, Gray's a former NCAA Division I wrestler, BJJ blue belt, and he has used his wrestling in the past to dominate fights. We go back to that Kenny Florian matchup. He was very effective with his ground game there, completely controlling him. He did take Nate Diaz down, but he hasn't shown a ton of wrestling recently, and I anticipate he could try to get back to that a little bit here and see if he can control Pearson on the mat. That'd be probably a good move on his part. But Pearson, good takedown defense, 81% takedown defense, very decent hips against George Soteropoulos when he fought in that matchup. But he still was taken down. He tends to get up quickly, but he did have a little bit of trouble against G-Sots on top. Soteropoulos is a very strong grappler, despite the fact that he's at the end of his career as well. Now, we did see Pearson slow down a little bit in round 2. That had a lot to do with the fact that he was wary of being taken down, and that could show up here if Gray can land some early takedowns. Now, Gray, he has the edge on the floor if he can get it there. If he actually looks to employ that style, he very much may not. On the feet, Pearson's a very good striker. Only 5 wins by knockout. Even though he has some significant power, lots of movement. He throws a lot of feint and head movement as well, and he will counter-strike and try and take advantage of an aggressive opponent and land those big shots, as we saw against Thiago Sanchez. He has pop in both hands. He dropped Thiago, who's known for his chin, despite the fact he couldn't finish him. Solid leaping left hook, which can be very effective, and he will also go to the body incredibly effectively, and he has some decent leg kicks he'll employ as well, maybe not so much against a wrestler. Now, when he fought Thiago, he was sitting out of his range, and it limited what Thiago was able to land, and at the same time, he was able to get in, get his shots in, and then get out before Thiago could do anything and do too much damage. He needed to throw a little more volume against Sanchez. That could be the one area where he could be criticized in that matchup, is he let Thiago be more aggressive, even though he was a less effective striker. Pearson maybe didn't do quite enough. I struggle to believe that's the case, though. He had some good job limiting the damage, though. And overall, in this matchup, he holds a 2-to-1 edge in strikes landed per minute against Gray Maynard, which is certainly, this fight goes the distance, a big advantage for him. He does have 2 losses by knockout, and we saw Cole Miller actually catch him with a quick jab, hurt him, and eventually finish him. Cub Swanson knocked him out at featherweight, so there's a chin issue with Ross Pearson as well. Now for Gray Maynard, solid boxing game, good power, very hard uppercut, which you saw him hurt Frankie with, and a good leaping left hook as well. But he throws a lot of singles, and that's a major concern. He was having trouble with the movement and distance when he fought Clay Guida, getting very frustrated and having limited success with his striking, despite the fact that he actually won that matchup. His cardio tends to wane a little bit. He takes some deep breaths, and certainly when he does a lot of swinging and missing, that will cost him. Overall, 30% striking accuracy, not exactly good numbers for a guy who needs to land with regularity to really be effective. Again, when he fought Guida, he was visibly frustrated with the movement of Clay Guida, and I expect to see Ross Pearson employ something similar. And he's also getting countered every time he tried to come forward. I mean, even though Clay lost that fight, I thought he employed a very effective strategy. And a lot of people like to dump all over Clay for that matchup. It was still, it appeared to be working for a good portion of that matchup. When you look at his most recent matchups, that's where the red flag pops up. He was dropped by a right hand and overwhelmed by TJ Grant in a knockout loss. He was stunned with a left and overwhelmed by a barrage of strikes by Nate Diaz, and plus the Frankie knockout. And none of those guys landed massive shots that would have floored most people. They were just, spot-on shots that they're flush, and they put Gray down, and that's a red flag that says maybe Gray's chin's not what it used to be. All 3 of his losses now have come by knockout, and that's something that against a guy like Ross Pearson, who can throw despite having only 5 wins by knockout, it certainly could be an issue. Seems to have trouble keeping up with faster opponents. You look at Frankie in that Clay Guida matchup, and of course the cardio and frustration factor could also play a significant role. For me, Gray Maynard seems to be past his prime. He just isn't there anymore. For Ross Pearson, he's put together some pretty solid efforts of late. And, you look back at his matchup against Edson Barbosa, was an incredibly dangerous striker, and Ross had a lot of success in that matchup. Now, one thing with Gray, he tends to overextend himself when he attacks, and I think Ross will be able to capitalize on that. I've seen the numbers switch a little with Ross another favorite, which disappoints me a little bit. But nonetheless, I've got Ross Pearson defeating Gray Maynard, and I'll take Ross by TKO. We now head to the main event of the evening. It takes place in the UFC's light heavyweight division. That's a very interesting matchup, as we have the number 8th ranked Ryan Darth Bader, 18-4-0, battling the number 10th ranked Strikeforce veteran Ovince St. Preux, carrying a record of 16 wins, 5 losses, and no draws. That's a massive fight for both men. The winner could be tabbed to face the fast-rising Rumble Johnson with a shot at the title, and John Jones, or whoever comes out of the John Jones, Daniel Cormier, Alexander Gustafsson triumvirate with the belt. One of these guys could possibly face him in the not-too-distant future. Now, Bader's comes from a collegiate wrestling background, and he's continued to show improvement in his striking over his career, and certainly seems to be rounding himself out. For OSP, he actually comes from a collegiate football background. He had some wrestling in high school, but he was a football player when he got to college, and he has been working to round out all aspects of his game, but he didn't come from a combat background, so it shows how far OSP has come. Physically, St. Preux is going to have a 1-inch height advantage and 5 inches of reach, which is a pretty substantial reach advantage that he'll look to try and employ here. When you look at competition overall, Ryan Bader certainly fought better opponents, looking at John Jones, Lyoto Machida, Glover Teixeira, 3 of the biggest guys to have beaten him. OSP, his biggest fight, and it turns out to be a loss, was against Gegard Mousasi. Also, most recently, Ryan Jim was a respectable opponent, but not on the level of Teixeira, Jones, or Machida. Now, both guys have power and submission capabilities, so they're not one-trick ponies, which is always a bonus when you're looking at fights like this. For Bader, as I said, his striking is certainly improving. His footwork showed a lot of improvements in his last match against a very dangerous striker. He gets in and out very quickly. He has a nice quick jab. He's being much lighter on his feet, which is something he hasn't done in the past. Against Feijiao, he showed that. But he still throws with power, which is something you need to mix up that ability to be quick and hard and elusive, but at the same time sit down your punches and land with it effectively. He throws a big overhand right. We saw him hurt Glover Teixeira with a quick flurry in that matchup, but he left himself open and eventually got finished. And that's something he needs to avoid, and that's something he's cost him in the past. Against Lyoto Machida, he rushed in and got knocked out after struggling to close the distance. Same thing, he was overconfident against Tito Ortiz and closed, and Tito caught him and eventually submitted him. Now, both fighters on the feet land and limit their opponents at roughly the same amount, so not a lot to be taken from there, at least statistically. OSP throws much harder strikes, at least that's the way I look at it. He throws a lot into all of his punches, hard kicks, heavy leather, mostly in singles, though, and that's what you get with these guys who can't, you don't focus on technique more, they try and, put guys out with every single thing they throw. But he tends to slow down and lose a little bit of steam from his strikes, which is a major concern, especially in fights, especially this one. It could be a 5-rounder if he can't compete at the same level that he does in 1-2 that he has to in 3, 4, and 5. He's really amped up his groundwork of late, and that's showed up. We saw him stop Cody Dono with some heavy ground and pound from top position, submitted Ryan Jimmo, and also the Von Flucho against Nikita Krylov was incredibly impressive. He averages just under 2 takedowns a fight at 60%. I expect to see those numbers go up, especially the number per fight. But he's facing the best wrestler he's ever faced in Ryan Bader. That's something to take note of. We'll see if he has any success with his wrestling. We did see him struggle when he fought Gegard Mousasi in Strikeforce with the wrestling part, but Mousasi took him down several times and was able to control him. I think he took him down 4 times overall. We did see him shut down the Gian Valente takedown attempts, so a lot of times passing Mousasi's match up, but nonetheless Bader's a very good wrestler, and we'll see if that plays a role. For Ryan Bader, he averages 3.54 takedowns and a 44% completion rate, so pretty respectable numbers on the ground. He has used well-planned-out wrestling-centric attacks in the past to nullify his opponents. Most recently was the Rafael Feijoa win, which is a pretty impressive win over a very dangerous striker. And against Rampage Jackson, he was very effective with his wrestling there and eventually won that matchup. When he fought Feijoa, he held on to the back of Feijoa when he couldn't score the takedowns, controlled him, landed some big hard knees both to the legs and the posterior and the side, which really took a lot of the bounce out of Feijoa and slowed him down significantly, and took away his movement as well, and as his attacks, his cardio. When he did take down Feijoa, he used very powerful takedowns and really smashed his way through him. And Feijoa is known for his strong hips and his takedown defense, and it shows how effective Bader was, and especially how effective his game plan was, making Feijoa more susceptible to takedowns by wearing him down early in the matchup. On the mat, he controlled him, he stayed very active, he landed some good hard shots, and that was something to avoid the stand-ups. I anticipate he's most likely going to use a wrestling-based attack against OSP to drag him into deep waters, push him in rounds 3, 4, and 5 if he can't finish him early, take away his legs, take away his power, take away his speed, and really go to work. Now, Bader has to be very careful though when he's, not to open himself up when he's attacking and get cracked, because OSP has serious power. He's very quick with that reach advantage. He certainly can do a lot of damage. But again, OSP's ability to do damage diminishes as fights go on, especially when he's not setting the pace and when he's forced to really push himself. OSP overall is 12-1 in fights that end early, either by submission or knockout. So very impressive numbers there. Unfortunately, he's 4-4 in decisions. He's picked up a couple decision wins recently, but it's one of those things where can he do enough in the later rounds to actually hold on? In Gian Valente's fight, it ended prematurely because of the eye poke and went to decision, but Valente was turning it on. I thought he was turning the fight in his tables in that matchup. I anticipate, for Bader, he has been finished 3 times. That's something to be concerned. He's been finished by elite guys, John Jones, Glover, Teixeira, and Lyoto Machida, and also Tito Ortiz, who was elite at one point, but certainly not when Bader finished him. Bader got finished with a quick knockdown and submission. Even if Bader can't land the takedowns early against OSP, I anticipate that St. Preux is going to eventually slow down, and the takedowns and a more effective striking from Bader will eventually start to take complete control of this matchup. He'll land things in combinations, get in and get out. We'll see OSP doing a lot of swinging and missing, and while he's still dangerous, I anticipate Bader will simply be the more effective fighter and really control it with his takedowns later in the matchup. A stoppage certainly is possible, but my prediction is Ryan Bader to defeat Ovince St. Preux by decision. So those are my 6 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC Fight Night 47 event. Should be a pretty interesting matchup. I'll be trying my best to do all 4 main prelim predictions. I'll definitely get to 3. There was one added late, which I'll try and get to if I have time. We have a number of fights coming up, including a 2-for-1 event, which has a lot of matchups. I probably won't break down all the fights on the card. I can't remember exactly where it was, China or Asia, somewhere over there. I haven't looked that much. The one headlined by Kong Lee versus Michael Bisping. I'll break down as many fights as I possibly can. That's a lot in one day. It most likely won't be in this format either. Please, again, tell me what you think. You don't need to comment on what I look like. I got this great set done. The thing I looked at is I need a better looking host, because everything looks great, and then you've got me sitting here doing what I do. Nonetheless, I hope you appreciate it. I hope it looks good. Please invest in my bet packs if you're considering betting. I've had a lot of success lately, especially taking some fights that are a little bit harder to call and making some money off of them. Also, the panel's been doing absolutely fantastic, so please check them out. Sprawl and Brawl paid out over $100 last time. It's only $5 to enter. Pick your top 8 fights and have the methods. You can check all that stuff out. Enter $5 and you'll win the cash prize. Certainly consider investing there. And I will be posting the winners and top 5s, and I can email it to all those who participate. So please consider that. And as always, thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.